This is Ancient Faith Today with Father Tom Soroka, a weekly live call-in show addressing the issues of our day from a distinctly Orthodox perspective. You can join the conversation by calling in at 855-237-2346. That's 855-AF-RADIO. Father Tom is the priest at St. Nicholas Orthodox Church in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and welcomes guests from across the globe to discuss important topics of interest. Here's Father Tom.
Welcome to Ancient Faith Today Live. This is Father Tom Soroka, and I'm so glad that you're with us this evening. We'll be taking your calls in a bit at 1-855-AF-RADIO. That's 1-855-237-2346. Matishka Trudy will be answering your calls tonight. So if you call in, make sure to turn the show volume off before you come on air. Now, a really popular way to interact with us, and if you have questions for the guest and maybe you don't want to call in, that's okay. Pick up your phone and send us a text. You can text us to 412-206-5012. That's 412-206-5012. And of course, the show is being streamed live on the AFM Facebook and YouTube pages. You can make comments there, and you can send us an email at aft@ancientfaith.com. So let's get started. You know, we've talked a lot in our recent shows about the massive influx of converts to the Orthodox faith. And when you ask people why they convert, it usually boils down to a couple of different reasons. One, people say that Orthodoxy is a living connection to the early church in both doctrine and practice. But there's another part that you hear a lot, and they'll say, the worship is just incredible. It's heavenly, it's uplifting. And as the show's title for tonight describes, it's sublime. The iconography, the vestments, the incense, the majestic piety, and especially the music, which is married to the rich words of truth. It makes worship an experience that can only be described using the words of the emissaries that Saint Vladimir sent to Hagia Sophia in Constantinople. They said, "We knew not whether we were in heaven or on earth. We only know that God dwells there among the people, and their services are fairer than the ceremony of other nations." Personally, from my earliest days, the music of the church made a big impact on me, and it really continues to do so at every service. It's a comfort in a melody, especially during this Lenten season. It's an inspiration to the Spirit, gives words of truth wings, and our singing becomes a kind of living sacrifice that we offer to God as we corporately raise our voices in song. And it reaches everyone from the young to the old. Music is so powerful. The American poet Longfellow said, "Music is the universal language of mankind." So tonight, we're going to talk about the music of the Orthodox Church. We're privileged to welcome an accomplished Orthodox Christian musician and composer, Kurt Sander. Kurt is a professor of music composition at Northern Kentucky University. He earned a doctorate in music composition from Northwestern University, and his various compositions have been performed on 5 different continents. Most amazingly, the 2019 CD release of his choral work, The Divine Liturgy, sung by the Patram Institute Singers under the direction of Peter Yermihov, was nominated for a Grammy Award for Best Choral Performance and for for one of the first times ever, and this still blows my mind, a major Orthodox choral work was translated from English into Church Slavonic. It's a kind of unheard of turn of events. So Kurt Sander, welcome to Ancient Faith Today.
Thank you, Father Tom. I'm really happy to be here.
I'm so happy that you're here too. I'm such an admirer of your work, and I look forward to our conversation. I feel this is really very, very important, and we want to tell our listeners you can listen to some of the compositions. We're going to play some of them tonight, but of course, the compositions are available for purchase at all the major outlets. And so I think this will be a wonderful, wonderful experience tonight. Kurt, I want to get to know you a little bit better. Tell me about your musical education and how you became a composer and then a teacher of composition.
Well, I think I always was a composer. I started piano lessons at a very young age, and just always seemed to, actually, I was chastised by my teacher because I always made up little things that were not in the score. So I guess I luckily had a teacher that didn't correct me overly on that. So I kind of nurtured that creativity. But I did a lot of the things that high schoolers did. I played in a band and sung in the choirs and so forth. And there was one teacher that really inspired me to go on in music. Was a high school teacher, a fellow named Gilbert Jackson, who kind of inspired me to go into teaching. I wanted to originally be a choral teacher, but as I went to undergraduate school and studied music education, I found myself more leaning toward composition, and then eventually realized that as a heart of a route that would be, it was something that I felt like I was called to do. And so I went on to get my master's at the conservatory in Cincinnati, and then the doctorate. And for a composer, you really have one option. You pretty much have to teach at the university if you want to be an active composer. I mean, there are very few people that can make a living at it today. So I knew what it would take. So it was a long journey, but I don't regret it.
That's fantastic. And of course, you have married that to your spiritual background. So I believe I read some of your bio, and you are a convert to the Orthodox faith. Tell me a little bit about your spiritual background and your formation, and how you came to the Orthodox faith, and then how you became involved, which I would think was obviously very natural for you, with the music of the Orthodox faith.
Well, it's interesting. You mentioned earlier how some people are converted in different ways, some by music, some by theology, others by history and whatnot. I'm definitely a one that was converted through music. I grew up Presbyterian, and although we were churchgoers, I wouldn't say that I was led a very spiritual life in the sense of going to church weekly and playing an active role. And especially in my teenage years, I kind of stopped going to church for a period of time. But as a singer, I ended up going to being a paid soloist in an Anglican or Episcopalian church that had a great musical life. And I felt like, wow, this is the kind of music that I'd been missing for a long time. And the ceremony of that liturgy was just beautiful. And so I was a paid soloist there, so I had no choice. I had to go every Sunday. But that church, they emphasized communion, weekly communion, which was not the case in the Presbyterian church. And so I was kind of interested. What is this communion that they have every week? So eventually my term there ended, and one of my friends in college, who was Russian Orthodox, ended up inviting me to an Orthodox wedding that was going to be sung in English. And she said, you can sing all the things, and if it's Slavonic, just sing Gospodи Pomiluj, and that's all you need to know. So I actually ended up going to this wedding, and it was in Cleveland on Parma, St. Sergius Cathedral there, and it was one of the most beautiful churches I've ever seen. And the music was just incredible. I mean, everyone, the whole service was was just sung. The liturgy that I went to before that was everything was sung. It was amazing. Never seen anything like that. And of course, the director, coincidentally, maybe not coincidentally, was Peter Yermahoff at that wedding. And the young lady who invited me just happened to be my current wife and my only wife, Larissa Sander, who invited me. And that was years ago. And it just, I think she was a music lover too. And we were in the same vocal studio together. And it just, she had a great way of teaching me about the theological elements of the faith. The music I kind of felt instinctively, but the service and how it's put together and all of the intricacies and the Slavonic language at that time, it was primarily a Slavonic parish. Sure. I mean, there were a lot of things that I certainly needed a lot of hand holding with, and she was there to provide that. So, so that's kind of what led me to the church. And at that point, I didn't have a home church because I was a soloist, and I started attending that church. And I guess the rest is history. I converted in 95, I think, was Dormition 95. No, Dormition 93. Dormition 93, and I was ended up married in 95. So the years go by.
That's really incredible. Yeah, they do. They do that very quickly. And so obviously the music and the faith and the worship was a draw. Do you find that you're able, and we're going to listen to some of your compositions, especially from the Divine Liturgy during the show today, but do you find that you're able to express through your music what kind of what you experienced when you first came to church? I in other words, and this is sort of like a difficult, I'm not sure how to ask this, but how would you characterize your musical compositional style? In other words, are you, and I don't mean this in any derogatory way, are you mimicking the music that you heard before? Are these certain ideas that you have used in your compositions, little melodies? Are you basing this on chant? What are the inspirations that you use to bring forward in your musical compositions, especially the Orthodox ones?
Wow, that's the very good but very complicated question.
Yeah.
I teach composition at the university, and one of the things we often talk about, and one of the things that a lot of students come to me concerned about, is that they don't have an individual style. And I always tell them not to worry about that. Your style will come on its own. It's a matter of who you are, and it's a collection of who you are. And you really start off composing like you do speaking. You imitate. And so being from the Russian tradition, a lot of my earlier works were simply not conscious imitations, but influences from that style. But over the years, I've got to be honest, Father, I don't think about my own style, because the minute I put it into that consciousness, I think it becomes almost the wrong way of thinking. I see music as really to me, the most intimate form of prayer. I've never been particularly good at long prayers, but when I write music, I'm with that text. Sometimes I will spend hours on a single line. Now that's
yes.
You can't get more intimate with the Word of God than that. And for me, it feels like prayer. And so I'm thinking about that. I'm thinking about beauty, and I'm thinking, I rarely find myself thinking, well, I want this to sound a little more American or a little more Russian.
Right.
Because I just feel like that's putting something into it that's just external.
Yes.
A lot of people have said they hear certain things in my music, and some people have said they hear everything from Americana folk music to African American spirituals, or to Russian music, or
right.
Broadway musicals or whatnot. And I guess it's all in me. I'm a product of everything I've listened to,
Right.
since I was a child, and I grew up listening to a lot of Russian music. My father loved Russian music, so a lot of that's in me, but it doesn't come out on a conscious level that I try to do this. I just try to express the text, and I try to make something as beautiful as it can possibly be, and that's really my aim. I think I recall a sermon of yours at one point. I've listened to you on occasion, and you said that the experience of someone coming into a church, they need to walk through those doors and just be wow, and that is so true, because that's the experience of many people. Not everybody. Other people come in different ways,
Sure.
but that feeling of just, I've never seen anything like this. I've never heard anything so beautiful in my life.
Right.
That is transformational. And, so I think when you're composing for the church, you do have to think about the missionary element. Maybe this composition will never be sung by a parish choir, but if thousands of people who are not Orthodox hear this music and they say, what is it about the Orthodox faith that could produce music like that? That in some sense is stronger than someone on the street corner, with a poster, right?
Agreed. I absolutely. I agree with you 100%. And I think that, I've had my own experiences like that. And obviously growing up in the church, there was never this sort of time when I didn't have that. So it's a little bit of a different experience. But I do remember being overwhelmed with the beauty of Rachmaninoff's Всеночная, the Vespers. In fact, I did my master's degree on that work. And I can remember driving one day. When I was after high school, or maybe during high school in the summers, I had a job in Erie. So I used to drive from Pittsburgh to Erie, and I would open the sunroof on my car, and I would listen to Rachmaninoff, and I would just blast it, And I remember, I probably would have been embarrassed to admit this when I was younger, but today I'm not. I would just start weeping. I would absolutely start weeping. It was so overwhelming and so beautiful that it just washes over you. And there is an experience there that I think the beauty of Orthodox worship is that we so intentionally marry music to that text. There is something life-giving when we take the music and actually somehow enliven it. Take the text and enliven it with that music, whether it's just chanting or whether it is a magnificent choral composition. And this is certainly an expression of this kind of incarnational aspect of Orthodox worship that is so profound and sublime, as we're going to say many, many times today. All right. So let's remind our listeners, you can give us a call if you have a question for Kurt. Maybe you are a choir director. Maybe you're an aspiring composer. Maybe you're an admirer of his work. We'd love to hear from you. 1-855-AF-RADIO. That's 1-855-237-2346. Or give us a text message at 412-206-5012. So, Kurt, what I'm going to ask Matuszka Trudy now, our producer, is we're going to listen to just about a minute-long excerpt of the composition Alleluia. So I love that in the recordings, you also have the reader's parts in many places as an introduction, or the priest's parts, and that really is going to set this up here. So Matuszka, we could play track number 1, Alleluia. Wow. Just really incredible. And, I'm obviously when I'm hearing it, I'm seeing a lot of different things, hearing a lot of different things, but also I'm, that song, Alleluia, this is so significant because we're bringing out the gospel at this time.
Yes.
The angels are singing, I'm seeing angels. It's really beautiful. Tell us, I don't know. Can you describe what are you trying to accomplish here in this particular piece?
Exactly.
Are you able to
as you
talk
said,
a little bit about that?
Yes. I mean, first of all, I deliberately wanted this to be a liturgy that included all of the exclamations because I wanted it to be the fullness of a service. And it did end up, we did have to go into 2 CDs on this, which luckily that my sponsor was agreeable to. But I felt like it was important because I wanted the liturgy to feel. I wanted to feel the progression of the liturgy, with the opening psalms, the antiphons. But as you said, this is a moment of great joy because we are being given the word, and so the anticipation of the word being read in the gospel. That's what I really wanted to convey. This growing anticipation of the word. And so I'm glad that you said that because that tells me I was on the right track.
Well, yeah, it's very, very clear, and you're building up, when you just begin with less voices there, and then it widens and broadens and grows. It's really just magnificent. Kurt, so we have someone that's very familiar to you on the phone line, and that is your daughter. And I believe her name is Kira. Is that correct?
That's one of them. Yeah.
Kira, welcome to Ancient Faith Today. You're talking with your dad.
Hi, Dad.
Hello. Glad you're listening.
Ella's here too, and Alla is as well. Hi, Kurt.
Wow, they sing in my choir, Father. All 3 of them.
That's wonderful. That's magnificent.
Wonderful musicians.
Well, Kira, tell me about your dad. What's it like to grow up with a composer and a church musician? And does that mean you have to go to all the services and sing for him?
Quite a bit, yeah. But not all the time, which is nice. But he's really been an inspiration, and he's really helped me find that connection to my own faith and find a stronger connection through music, which has always been a part of my family. And yes. I always love hearing his stories and his achievements and how proud I am of him for that.
Oh, it's very nice. But I will say we're a very musical family, Father. My wife is also a choral conductor, and I really give her the credit for working with the kids because she has done such a great job. And for those of you who are out there, please teach your kids to sing at an early age because it's so hard when they're older to learn that. So yeah, we're blessed to have a nice choir with these kids.
Kira, how old are you?
I'm 17.
17? So you're a senior this year?
Yeah.
So what's going to happen after this? Are you going to study music like your dad, or are you going to go into something else?
I'm going to double major in business and theater.
Nice.
So
all right, have you already chosen your school?
Not yet. Nope.
All right, you better get on it.
Yep.
We're getting close. We're waiting.
Good. All right. Kira, thank you so much for calling. That was really lovely. We're proud of your dad too, but it's a great honor to talk to you, and wish you all the best in the future. And you said your sister's there too, correct?
Yes.
All right, good. Thanks for listening, guys. Have a blessed Holy Week in Pascha. Rest your voice. You're going to need it this week. All right. 1-855-AF-RADIO. That's 1-855-237-2346. Kurt, we have a text that came in from Rick. Mm-hmm. It says, what non-Orthodox composers or songwriters have you found inspire you? And he says, in your church melodies and harmonies. So do you have any composers that you find inspirational or exemplary?
I don't know that I am inspired particularly by any one composer in my church music. In terms of non-Orthodox composers, certainly the canon of Orthodox music is inspiring just for its just being there. But in terms of non-Orthodox composers, the Fauré Requiem, Gabriel Fauré, was an amazing influence on me as a teen. It's just an incredibly beautiful work. And I remember my father giving me the LP of it and had a drawing of 3 nuns on the cover. And he told me that it was written right after his father had died. And that just kind of said, wow, that must be an emotional piece. And so I remember putting it on, and it was just, it's to this day remains one of my favorite works. And I will say there is a little unintentional quote from the Fauré Requiem in Paradisium that I later found in my piece. So it did creep in there.
Unintentional. It was just embedded in your soul, maybe, you know?
That's right. But in terms of, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I also admire a Requiem piece, and that is Verdi's Requiem.
Oh,
I find it to be very sort of like Russian in its sound, if you will, that kind of heavy Italian, very broad, powerful. I've always loved Verdi's Requiem. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yes. No, I was saying, I think that the thing that connects me with other composers, whether they're sacred composers or not, is just the element of humanity and suffering. And composers like Beethoven and Schubert, we know their music, but if you read about their lives, it was just filled with tremendous, tremendous suffering and isolation. And, I think God touches us through suffering and uses suffering. And sometimes that comes out through the music. Just as the music can be born out of joy, it can also be born out of suffering. And I think you can translate that in a variety of ways to spiritual texts, the suffering on the cross and the suffering of the Mother of God in seeing her son hanging upon the wood. So I think that element of human suffering is just universal, and you can find it in Schubert, you can find it in Beethoven, you can find it in just about any composer, and that really, to me, speaks to the humanity that we all share. I mean, God's given us the ability to be moved by art, and I don't think it just happened through natural selection. I think it was a deliberate and conscious gift that He gave us to be able to process joy and to process sorrow and to understand spiritual things, because music is a spiritual, sublime, as you said, element. I mean, it takes us out of this world.
Yes. And I want to talk a little bit more about Orthodox music as a sort of like a growing force within American Orthodoxy, right? What does it mean to have an American style or chant, if you will? We're going to talk about that on the other side of the break. So, Kurt, let's go for a break. What we're going to do is we're going to play your hymn to the Theotokos. We're going to listen to a short clip of that. Folks, listen. We're going to go for a break. We're going to come right back. We are talking with Kurt Sander. We're talking about all things Orthodox music. This is the hymn to the Theotokos by Kurt Sander.
Especially for our most holy, most pure, most blessed, glorious Lady Theotokos, and ever Virgin Mary.
We'll be back in a moment. In the meantime, the lines are open at 855-237-2346. Don't go away.
Now available on Ancient Faith Publishing, The Shield of Psalmic Prayer, reflections on translating, interpreting, and praying the Psalter. In this posthumous collection of poet and teacher Donald Sheehan's reflections on psalms and psalmic prayer, culled from his journals and teaching notes, you will find two quite different kinds of writing working in tandem: poetic and personal journaling by a man of faith, a scholar, a linguist, and, in the deepest sense, a teacher, alongside scholarly, linguistic, and poetic analysis by a man steeped in poetry who thought like a poet. Here's what Father Stephen Freeman has to say on the book.
In the spiritual life, two things are essential: what we do and how we do it. In this wonderful collection of the late Donald Sheehan's thoughts on the Psalms, we see both. He takes us into what the Psalms are in depth, that is the Word of God, but he also demonstrates time and again how those depths shape his life in the world in which he lives. Thus we are given two things: the Word of God and a life in which the Word has given shape. It's a path we all should walk.
You can find this book and others like it at store.ancientfaith.com. Again, that is store.ancientfaith.com.
We're back with Ancient Faith Today and Father Tom Soroka. Give us a call at 855-237-2346. Here once again is Father Tom.
Welcome back. We're talking about the music of Orthodox Christianity with Orthodox composer Kurt Sander. Kurt, I wanted to talk a little bit about the idea of composing music for the Orthodox Church. Now, you and I are both from the Russian tradition, so we're used to this, but some people from other backgrounds, or maybe they misunderstand what we're doing here. Talk to us about how you see the canonical tradition of the Church with its canonical melodies, whether they be Byzantine or Znameni or whatever, right? And as an American convert to the Orthodox faith, what are you trying to accomplish? That's number one. Number two, how do you view the canonical tradition? And do you think that there will be an American Orthodox tradition, if you will, someday?
All very good questions. Yeah, I think the first one, what am I trying to accomplish? I think my goal is simply to write beautiful music that brings people closer to God. I think anything more than that, that I'm putting something in that shouldn't be there. I don't have as a mission to be an American Orthodox composer, to write an American style, to force something that's not there. And this kind of goes back to what I said. If it's in me, it happens naturally. And, I've often been asked, well, are you going to write a bluegrass liturgy or a Appalachian liturgy or something like that? And I understand the need for people to feel like it's their own, but we it's not the same. I mean, we do have our own traditions in this country, distant as they may be, but we're in a time where I don't know that we have a uniform American musical tradition that we could incorporate. Not in Russia, they certainly had a folk tradition that was very thriving. The Greeks had their traditions, Serbs and so forth. But where are we going to look for our inspiration?
Good point.
Yeah, and what I worry about is on a very practical. This goes to your idea of canonical melodies. The tones, the 8 tones as we know them, as stichira and tropar and so forth. I mean, they're on a practical level. They're a tool, and they come to us from a certain period of time when we had Germanic influence, and it was codified in a 4-part harmony. I'm of course speaking about the Russian tradition.
Russian,
yeah, and on a practical level, it's a tool, a way to sing from text without having to typeset the notes and having 3-ring binders and so forth. And on a spiritual level, I guess it reflects the church calendar in a musical kind of way, right? So that we're seeing the passage of time through the different melodies. But I think we make a real mistake if we see that simplicity of stichira singing, and then we map it onto the entire canon of Orthodox church music as if this is what it should be: simple, 4-part, utilitarian singing. And I think why I think we're susceptible to that, and I believe that this the Anglophone West is kind of still has that residual DNA from Calvinism, where music is simple. The regulative principle should be just simple singing, just a means of delivering the word, and it's not high art, right? It's not. And I understand that that's a reaction from the Catholic excess, or so-called excess in the music, and it was more reactionary. But I still feel like in some of the parishes, I find that we're simple people. We sing simply, and of course, I understand that you sing what you're able to sing, but that's a different philosophy than we shouldn't sing. Maybe we can't sing this music, but the idea that no, that's too fancy, that's too we're simple people, we should just do very simple melodies. I think that really it goes against, it's a stark contrast to the interior of most Orthodox churches in the world, right? Where you walk in and you see this incredible beauty, and the music needs to reflect that. And that's what I see as a concern. One of the many concerns I have with the state of Orthodox music in this country. And even though no one will probably, parishes aren't capable of singing a lot of what I've written or what others have written on these CD recordings that are getting a lot of public attention, it doesn't mean that they're not important. I think, we talk about prototypes in Orthodoxy, and even though we're not, the prototype of the icon, and the prototype of what we should be, the icon of Christ within us, we're never to that point, but we still need to know what that is. And I'm afraid if we look only to the very functional tradition of Orthodox music, we lose that dimension.
Indeed. Thank you. That was quite well put. And you started to go to a certain place. I wanted to press you a little bit further.
Okay.
You spoke about the interior of the church, and I think you're sort of referring to iconography. Do you see a parallel, or here in this case, a parallel between the Orthodox musical tradition and the iconographic painting tradition? That is, that somehow there's a kind of form there, but there's also a tremendous variety.
Yes, it's this kind of tradition, but then you have the creative freedom to allow your own style, not in a conscious way. Iconographers don't say, I'm gonna really shoot for this style, right? I really want to convey. That's much more of a Western idea, but within the tradition that you're given, you're able to do something that is new, not for the sake of making it new, and not that new is necessarily better, but it is something that speaks to the time. And I think that's important. I guess I have to go back and revise my answer. What are you trying to do writing music? I think I want to speak to the people in my time in a way that they can respond to. And we've seen icons change over the course of history, very highly romanticized traditions, and then the Greek influence and various influences. And, I think perhaps there's a reason for that. Perhaps certain cultures, certain time periods respond differently to certain artistic styles, if you will. So, I think there is a connection. Of course, the thing I wonder about is how much of this is economic. In other words, how much is of our simplicity in singing and our simplicity of churches and so forth is just a matter of not having the resources to do the big things, or to hire an iconographer, to do these.
I certainly, I absolutely agree with you. And I I'm sort of feeling this. I'm sure that some of my parishioners know that we've had these discussions in our own parish. We have a very good choir, but we have a lot of converts, and they sometimes express a little bit of angst about there not being more congregational singing. And, at certain times, like with my father and so forth, we had a tremendous amount of congregational singing, and that's beautiful. But I also want to hear that beautiful choral music. And I think the Orthodox tradition supports that, right? There is, I was having this discussion with somebody, and I said, look, if you look in the books, the most ancient books, you have places where the people sing, but you also have places where the cantors or the chanters or the choir sings by themselves, and specifically like the cherubic hymn. That was never done by the people. That was always done by the set apart chanters or singers. So I think there's room for both. I also love that you said that it's kind of economic. I would also say, or ask you what you think of the current state of musical education and musical participation in our country. In other words, 75 years ago, everyone sang. That was something that people did naturally. But here today, do you find that it's sort of less frequent, less often that people are actually willing to sing? Maybe that's why some choirs are getting smaller.
You're absolutely right. And it does, I think I read a statistic of how many young children play a musical instrument in an Asian country versus, a country like America or Canada. And the numbers were astonishingly different. You learn how to appreciate music in many ways as a child. And what I fear is that we've been so busy with so many other things, sports and the internet and movies and whatnot, that it's kind of, music has been kind of pushed aside. And then in a curricular standpoint, it's almost been relegated to extracurricular status in many schools. Not all. There's some many fine music programs and fine music teachers, but when you push it to the extracurricular, or you make it just about the fun and not about the high art, it's kind of like, what do they say? You're not supposed to eat wheat flour or white flour, right? Because it's all the good stuff's been stripped out of it. It may taste good, but all the substance, the real heavy stuff that gives you nourishment, has been stripped away from it. And I think in a lot of school systems, and again, not all, but a lot of them, they focus on the fun element of music. And there's nothing wrong with music being fun, but there's so much more that touches the soul. And even on even if you're talking on a secular level, you can teach that. But the older you get, the more you lose a connection to that. If you don't use it, you lose it. And that's why musical lessons are so critical. Getting kids to sing, getting kids to play an instrument, playing them music that has a different substance than what you get on the radio or Spotify. Right. I mean, nothing wrong with those things, but you need to taste it, right? You need to taste this stuff. Right. You can't just appreciate it all of a sudden when when you're 40 and then you say, well, I'd like to sing, and then you don't know how to, and it's much harder when you're that age, just like a language.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Very good. Kurt, I want to move to another topic here, which I alluded to at the beginning of the show. Obviously, in the history of our country, with Orthodoxy coming to our country in the 1794 through Alaska, and we were singing, at least in the Russian tradition, certainly in the Greek tradition, they were singing in Russian, or Church Slavonic, they were singing in Greek. And then there was this kind of evolution where they were taking the Russian music and sort of pasting the words into the syllables, right? And it was a little bit awkward. And now we've sort of learned about the emphasis of the words and the syllables, and it's becoming a little bit more natural sounding. But what has happened with your work is really amazing, and that is you wrote this work first in English, and then it was translated to Church Slavonic. Talk to us a little bit about that. What were some of the problems? I want to ask you first. Now, obviously, you direct in a Russian church, so I assume you're familiar with the text of the liturgy in Church Slavonic. Do you speak Russian?
I speak a little bit of Russian. I'm not fluent by any stretch, but I am very familiar with the Church Slavonic hymnography and texts and so forth. So I don't think I could have done it if I hadn't been.
How did that go? How did you have to change the musical compositions themselves, or did you just kind of fit it in? What did you do?
Yes, you had. It was. It's very strange, Father. I've often set Slavonic works to English and had to deal with that process for years and years and years.
Of course. Yep.
But to do the opposite, it's almost the only thing I could kind of compare it to is if you're always using the mouse with your right hand on a computer, all of a sudden using it with your left hand. It's like, what? Right. Because usually there's so many more syllables. I forget the actual percentage. I actually did a study, but the Slavonic has so many more syllables that you have to squeeze all these syllables in various ways. Whereas English is full of these monosyllabic syllables, often chains of 8 to 10 single syllable words. So you have all of these syllables now that you have to cram into just a few notes, whereas before you have all these notes that you have to cram into just a few syllables. So it was a much different feeling. And I did have to, when I listened to it, I hear a little times when I had to really kind of smush a lot into just a small phrase to get through.
That's fascinating.
And certain things work really well, certain things don't. I mean, Trisagi and Sveti Bože, Holy God, they seem to line up really well, but
yes,
others don't line up well at all, and you've really got to chop things up. The Beatitudes, for example. Wow, I mean, I had to do some heavy surgery. I felt like I was a bionic surgeon of some sort. But it was a great experience, and I enjoyed it more than the English. Going to English from Slavonic, I enjoyed it more.
Really. And I loved the recording of the Slavonic because it had a little bit of a different character to it. So when you listen to the English, it had one character, and then I listened to the Slavonic, and it was a little bit different. It
is different.
And just because of the language and maybe the style of the singing or whatever, but it was really quite lovely. So what we're going to do now is play Matushka Trudy. Could we go to number 4, directly number 4, Receive the Body of Christ, Тело Христово примите. So lovely. It's so lovely. And honestly, except for maybe that one soprano note there, that's very doable for a choir. I think, a decent choir could pull that off.
Yes, actually, there are certain selections that are more singable than others, and I think that one in particular has had some choir interest here in the States. But it's interesting because when I first introduced that work to the Russian choir, there were a couple singers who were quite skeptical, and I felt like they went to the director and said, "Who is this person that's that's copying our style and trying to make money off of our style. Appropriation, cultural appropriation. So I think she explained it to my history and my involvement in the church, and I think that kind of calmed them down. But I'm sure they felt like, wow, someone's stealing our national art.
No. I think this is a really, really good example of, and I will just say this. I'll probably get criticized for it, but I think there's a certain maturity. I know that we are a very young church here in America. We're very diverse, but I believe that especially your composition, Benedict's compositions, I think we're sort of coming into a kind of maturity that is allowing us to almost go outside to sort of open the doors to the church and allow that beauty to permeate the culture, the larger culture. And so, you're making these CDs and these magnificent performances and being nominated for Grammys. That is a sign of a kind of maturity where we're no longer insular. Do you sense that at all?
Absolutely. And the singers that I've talked to who have sung on these CDs, and a lot of the people who have listened, or reviewers who really don't know anything about Orthodoxy, I mean, I think they're more likely to listen to an American composer writing this than they are a new Russian composer, I think, and especially using the English language. And I think we're getting past the stage where we're doing adaptations of previously composed Russian works. And we're really writing not just simple, 4-part things, but we're writing more complex music that is reaching the outside world in ways that I never expected. And so I'm always, it's extra special when people who are not Orthodox reach out to me and describe what they're feeling when they listen to this music, because there are spiritual people out there. They may not know it's spiritualism, or they may not know it's a kind of a sacredness inside of them.
Yes.
But when they respond to that music, I hope it's touching them in that kind of way.
Indeed. And you are doing a work here that, in a way, this is the gift that God has given you. It's the way in which you are expressing the Orthodox faith through music that can't be done through books. As much as I love books, this is a different experience of Orthodoxy, just as legitimate. And what you're doing here is very profound. All right. So, Kurt, we're at the end of our hour. I'm so grateful for you and for your work, for your wife, your beautiful family. I wanted to ask you one last question. If you would please give some advice to Orthodox musicians and choir directors and singers in parishes across America. As I said, and as you acknowledged, in certain places, we have very strong musical traditions. It has been sustained. In other places, it's very difficult sometimes to maintain that when you have a smaller parish or parish that maybe doesn't have that tradition. What advice would you give to those musicians and choir directors and singers? And how can we encourage their training of new composers and arrangers and directors and singers?
It's a great question. I think the best thing, we're so isolated, but we have this thing called the internet, which I think really helps us to connect with one another. And I think everyone who is new to the job, a lot of people are thrown in without any training. They need to reach out for help. There's a lot of resources. My wife actually works with people on Zoom who are new conductors who don't know anything, and just teaching them the melodies, just teaching them about the services. There are people out there who are willing to do this, and in some cases for free, but you have to get connected to a community. You can't do it on your own. It's too complicated. It's too much. Even if you're musically trained, you need mentorship. You need an apprenticeship. You need to, maybe a virtual apprenticeship, but you do need to talk with people. I couldn't have done what I have done without the people that came before me who guided me and told me this is wrong, this is right. You'd be better if you did this. I mean, it's so important, and especially in our tradition.
Yes, very good. Thank you. I appreciate that very much. All right, Kurt Sander, thank you so much. Best wishes with all of the work that you do. I did want to ask you, what's on the horizon? What's next? You really you set the bar very high here.
Well, thank you.
What's next?
Well, right now I'm working on a collection of music for parish use, which is music that I think is composed, original music that is singable by your typical choir. Maybe not the choir, but that has one singer. But there is some 2-voice, some 3-voice, 4-voice stuff that's very singable. So I'm doing 3 volumes over the next couple of years on that, liturgy, vigil, and feast days. And then I'm working on the possibility of a couple projects. One is a more concert-oriented version of an Orthodox requiem. Not the Latin Mass, of course, but something that deals with how we approach death, and I think it's an important time to kind of think about these things, and so that's just all kind of in the works right now. But definitely the first volume of that church music set should come out this fall.
Oh wow, that's great! I can't wait to see it. Kurt Sander, thank you so much for all you do. We're looking forward to your new works. God's blessings for a blessed Holy Week, good strength, and a blessed Pascha.
Thank you. Same to you, Father.
Before I share a few final thoughts, I want to offer my sincere thanks to Kurt Sander for joining us tonight. Thanks to Matuszka Trudy for engineering the program, to our show production assistant, Melissa Graff, for her work behind the scenes, for everybody that's listening in, and for those who will listen. Tonight, we're going to leave you with the final composition of Kurt's composition of the Divine Liturgy with the magnificent Many Years. Before we play it, remember to like us on Facebook, share out our program. We won't be back for 2 weeks. We're coming back on Bright Tuesday. Many years to you.